The entire ballroom went silent. 200 people in evening gowns and tuxedos, crystal chandeliers, Christmas decorations, a charity gala for London's elite. And in the center of it all, a powerful man pointing his finger at Paul McCartney. You boys think you're something special, but you're just a fad. 4 kids who got lucky. This time next year, nobody will remember your names. The room held its breath. This wasn't just any wealthy businessman. This was Vincent Vinnie Marconi, connected, dangerous. The kind of man who made problems disappear. The kind of man nobody contradicted, ever. Paul McCartney stood up slowly, set down his champagne glass, and smiled. What he said in the next 60 seconds would become the most talked about moment of the 1965 Christmas season. Not because it was loud, not because it was aggressive, but because it was so perfectly, devastatingly calm that it made a mob boss apologize in front of 200 witnesses. This is that story. December 18, 1965, the Dorchester Hotel, London, 8 p.m. The annual Christmas charity gala was the event of the season. London's wealthiest, most powerful, most connected, all gathered to donate money, be seen, and remind each other of their importance. Black tie, mandatory, £500 per plate, the money going to children's hospitals, the prestige going to whoever hosted. This year's host was Vincent Marconi, Italian-American, based in London for the last decade. Officially, he owned hotels and restaurants. Unofficially, he ran protection rackets, gambling operations, and had connections that reached from London to New York to Sicily. The kind of man who smiled at charity galas and had people beaten in back alleys. Respectable and terrifying in equal measure. Vinnie had decided this year's gala needed entertainment, not just a string quartet, something modern, something that would make headlines. So he'd invited the Beatles. Not asked, invited. Which in Vinnie's world meant commanded. I want the Beatles to play at my Christmas gala. Make it happen. His people made it happen. Called Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager. Mr. Marconi requests the Beatles' presence at his charity event. Very generous donation to children's hospitals. Excellent publicity. December 18th, the Dorchester. Black tie. Brian knew who Marconi was, knew what requests from men like that really meant. But he also knew the Beatles were independent, successful enough now to refuse anyone. So he presented it as an option. There's a charity gala, good cause, high profile, but it's hosted by Vincent Marconi. You know that name? The mobster? John asked. The alleged businessman with alleged connections. Brian corrected carefully. We can decline, but it might create complications. Paul thought about it. It's for charity, children's hospitals. Yes, legitimate cause. The event itself is respectable. Then we'll do it. But we're guests, not performers. We attend. We donate. We don't perform unless we choose to. Make that clear. Brian made it clear. Marconi's people agreed. The Beatles would attend as honored guests. No obligations, just presence. December 18th arrived. The Beatles showed up at the Dorchester in tuxedos, looking sharp, professional, ready to smile, shake hands, and leave early. Standard charity event protocol. The ballroom was magnificent, gold and crystal, massive Christmas tree in the corner. Tables arranged in a horseshoe around a small stage. 200 of London's elite, politicians, businessmen, celebrities, all performing wealth and importance. The Beatles were seated at Marconi's table, the head table, positioned as honored guests but also as trophies. Look who Vinnie Marconi can command to attend his events. Look at his power and influence. Vinnie was 55, thick build, expensive suit that couldn't hide the muscle underneath, gray hair slicked back, pinky ring, loud laugh. The kind of man who dominated every room through sheer force of personality and the implicit threat of violence. He was charming at first, welcoming the Beatles, asking about their music, their tours, playing the gracious host. But there was something underneath, a condescension, a barely hidden contempt for these young men who'd achieved fame without his permission or control. Dinner was served, multiple courses, conversation flowed, wine glasses constantly refilled. Vinnie held court, telling stories, making jokes, everyone laughing at the right moments, afraid not to. Between the main course and dessert, Vinnie stood up, tapped his glass with a knife. The room quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, for your generosity, for supporting the children's hospitals. This is what we do. We take care of our community. We take care of our own. Applause, agreement, self-congratulation. And I want to especially thank our special guests tonight, the Beatles, these four young men who've taken the world by storm with their music. He gestured to them. More applause. The Beatles smiled, nodded, uncomfortable but polite. Then Vinnie's tone shifted, slightly, just enough. You know, I remember when I was their age, 20-something. Thought I knew everything. Thought I'd conquered the world. But I learned, you can't stay on top forever. Trends change. People move on. What's hot today is forgotten tomorrow. The room sensed where this was going. The mood shifted, less celebratory, more tense. Vinnie looked directly at the Beatles, pointed at them. You boys think you're something special, and maybe you are, right now, but you're just a fad. Four kids who got lucky, caught a wave. This time next year, nobody will remember your names. Some new thing will come along, some new boys with new haircuts, and you'll be yesterday's news. Complete silence. 200 people frozen, watching this powerful, dangerous man insult the Beatles to their faces at his own charity gala. John's jaw clenched. George looked down at his plate. Ringo shifted uncomfortably. But Paul set down his champagne glass carefully, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and stood up. The room somehow got quieter. This was it, the moment. Would Paul McCartney, 23 years old, challenge Vincent Marconi, 55, connected, dangerous, in front of 200 witnesses? Paul smiled, not aggressive, not defensive, just calm, genuinely calm. Mr. Marconi, thank you for that perspective. It's always valuable to hear from someone with experience. Vinnie smiled back, thinking he'd won, thinking Paul was backing down. Paul continued, you're absolutely right that trends change, that what's popular today might be forgotten tomorrow. That's the nature of culture, of art, of everything, really. Nothing lasts forever. Heads nodded. Agreement. Paul was being reasonable, accepting the criticism gracefully. But I wonder if you've considered something else. Paul's voice stayed calm, conversational, like he was discussing the weather. You say we're a fad, that we got lucky, that we'll be forgotten, and maybe you're right. Maybe in a year, nobody will care about the Beatles. That's possible. He paused, let that sit, then continued. But here's what I find interesting, Mr. Marconi. You invited us here tonight, not because we're a fad, but because we're valuable. Because having the Beatles at your event makes it more prestigious, makes people want to attend, makes headlines. If we were just lucky kids riding a trend, you wouldn't have bothered, would you? Vinnie's smile faltered. Barely, but enough. Paul kept going, voice still calm, still friendly, still devastating. And you're right that we're young, we are. 23, 24, 25 years old. We haven't lived as long as you, haven't accumulated as much experience. But in our short lives, we've accomplished something interesting. We've made music that millions of people love. That makes them happy. That connects them to something bigger than themselves. We've created joy on a global scale. At 23, the room was absolutely silent. Everyone watching this young man in a tuxedo quietly dismantling a mob boss. Now, Mr. Marconi, I don't know much about your businesses, hotels, restaurants. Very successful, I'm sure. But I do know something about legacy, about what lasts. And I think music lasts longer than most things. Beethoven died 200 years ago. People still play his music. Elvis made his first record 10 years ago. People still love it. The songs we've written, the music we've made, I genuinely don't know if people will remember it in a year, or 10 years, or 100. But I know this. We created something. We made something that didn't exist before. We added something to the world instead of just taking from it. Paul paused, looked directly at Vinnie, still smiling, still calm. Can you say the same? The room gasped. Actual gasps. Did Paul McCartney just challenge Vincent Marconi's entire life and legacy in front of everyone? Vinnie's face went red, his hands clenched. This is where it usually turned violent, where men like Vinnie reminded people why they were feared, where consequences happened. But Paul wasn't done, and his voice stayed calm, gentle, almost kind. I'm not trying to insult you, Mr. Marconi. I'm genuinely asking. When you're gone, what will you be remembered for? The hotels, the money, the power? Or will you be remembered for moments like this? Standing in a ballroom at a charity event insulting 4 young men who've never done anything to you. Is that the legacy you want? Everyone held their breath. This was insane. This was suicide. You don't talk to Vincent Marconi like this. You don't question him. You don't challenge him, especially not in public. Vinnie stood there, face red, fists clenched, staring at Paul, the entire room waiting for the explosion. Then something changed in Vinnie's eyes. Something shifted. Maybe it was Paul's calm. Maybe it was the truth in his words. Maybe it was seeing himself reflected back and not liking what he saw. But something broke. Vinnie sat down, heavily, like the air had gone out of him. He picked up his wine glass, drained it, set it down, and said something nobody expected. You're right. 2 words, quiet, barely audible, but everyone heard them. You're right, Vinnie repeated louder now. I'm a bitter old man who tears down kids because they've accomplished something I never could. They've created something people love, and I'm jealous, so I insulted them at my own event in front of everyone, because that's what small men do. They make themselves feel bigger by making others feel smaller. The room was in shock. Vincent Marconi apologizing, admitting he was wrong. This didn't happen. This never happened. Vinnie stood up again, walked around the table, stood in front of Paul, extended his hand. I apologize, that was uncalled for. You boys are talented. What you've built is real, and I was wrong to dismiss it. Paul shook his hand. Thank you, Mr. Marconi. That means a lot. Call me Vinnie, and for what it's worth, I hope you're wrong about being forgotten in a year. World needs more of what you do, less of what I do. He turned to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to revise my earlier statement. The Beatles aren't a fad, they're artists, and I was an idiot for suggesting otherwise. Let's give them the applause they deserve. The room erupted. Standing ovation, not for Vinnie, for Paul, for the Beatles, for the moment they just witnessed. A 23-year-old kid making a powerful mob boss apologize with nothing but calm words and devastating logic. The rest of the evening was surreal. People coming up to Paul, congratulating him, asking how he'd done it, how he'd stood up to Marconi without losing his temper, without being cruel, just calmly, kindly, destroying every point Marconi made. How did you stay so calm? Someone asked. Paul shrugged. He was wrong, and anger wouldn't have proved him wrong. Logic did. Truth did. Besides, he wasn't really insulting us. He was revealing his own insecurities. Angry people lash out when they're scared or sad or feeling small. The kindest thing you can do is show them they don't need to. After the event, as they were leaving, Vinnie came over one more time, pulled Paul aside. Kid, I need to tell you something. I've broken men for less than what you said to me tonight. Literally broken them. But you made me see myself, made me want to be better. That's rare, that's powerful, thank you. You're welcome, Vinnie. One more thing. You're going to be around a lot longer than a year. Trust me, I know trends, I know fads. What you boys have, that's not a fad, that's the future, and I'm sorry I couldn't see it. Vincent Marconi died in 1978, heart attack. At his funeral, his daughter told a story. My father changed after December 1965, became gentler, kinder, started actually caring about the charities he donated to instead of just using them for image. When I asked him why, he said, Paul McCartney taught me something at a Christmas party. That legacy isn't about power or money. It's about what you create and how you treat people. I spent 50 years getting it wrong, trying to get the last 20 years right. December 18, 1965. A mob boss insulted the Beatles at his own charity gala, and Paul McCartney responded with such perfect, calm wisdom that he changed a man's life. Not with anger, not with cruelty, but with truth delivered kindly. The Beatles were forgotten in a year? No, they're still here, still remembered, still loved, still creating joy decades after that Christmas party. Vincent Marconi's hotels, sold and demolished, his restaurants, closed. His legacy? A daughter's story about the time Paul McCartney taught her father to be kind. That's real power. Not violence, not intimidation, but the ability to speak truth so calmly that even the most hardened people have to listen. That's Paul McCartney. That's the Beatles. That's why they lasted. And that's why Vincent Marconi apologized.